Hello everyone and welcome to this, my first of two videos on the Minolta QTsi, or as we are going to call it, the QTsi. This is a Minolta Maxxum camera in the Maxxum lineup. It is a program mode only 35mm interchangeable lens SLR. Okay, what's that mean? 35mm, super simple, takes 35mm film. Interchangeable lens, super simple. You can take your lens off at any time when you're not taking a photo, put another one on, and it's not going to affect the images at all. Program mode means that when you go to shoot this camera, the only mode that you have available to you is program mode. And what that means is that there are a few things we're going to see here in the second video. These different modes up here are called scene modes. But basically, when you shoot this camera, you don't really have any control over the aperture or shutter speed. The camera will look at the world in front of you and make decisions about what the aperture and shutter speed should be, and you don't really have any say in it. So there are very few things you can actually control on this camera when you take a photo. That's what program mode means. The camera has shutter speeds of 30 seconds to 1/2000th of a second. The viewfinder magnification is 0.75x with a 90% frame coverage. What that means is that what you see in here is 75% of the size of what will be on your photos, and that's what 0.75x means. What 90% frame coverage means is if what you are seeing right now is what's going to be on the film, then about 5% on each side and the top and the bottom will be on your film, but not in the viewfinder. So you get a bit more image when you get your photos back than what you can see, and that helps with cropping when you go to do some image corrections. It has a plain matte focusing screen with an indicator for the single autofocus point. I think it only has one. Yeah. There is a central area in the middle. That's the autofocus area. The autofocus is limited to what's in the center of the frame. The flash sync speed is 1/90th of a second, and one major flaw with these that has almost universally not held up, to the point that in the last couple of years that I was actively selling cameras, I saw exactly 0 of these that did not have various stages of this problem, is that they use a pentamirror system in here. So where normal cameras will have a block of glass inside the pentaprism area, that's heavy. So cameras like this that were lower spec, meant to be lightweight, had mirrors instead of a block of glass that replicated the action of the pentaprism. The mirrors in this camera are prone to tarnishing. That means they start off by turning yellow. This camera, in fact, looking through it, it looks like I have a yellow filter on front of the lens. I don't. It's just that the mirrors are tarnished. Over time, that tarnish gets worse, and then pretty soon the mirrors turn to a dark blue. As they get worse, there is no way that I know of to undo that without completely disassembling this and scrubbing the silver off the mirrors and then recoating them. Realistically, it's not something you're going to do with this camera. Once it starts, as far as I know, the process is going to continue until the mirrors are completely unusable. And they pretty much become unusable when they start turning blue, because that throws off metering and it throws off your ability to compose your scene. So just be aware that that is something that happens with these and is likely to happen with all of them. The target market for this when it came out was the entry-level shooter. And we know that because it's a full automatic camera, you have very little control over what it does. And it's intended to be a camera that converted people from point-and-shoot cameras, which were very simple, easy to use, up to interchangeable-lens SLRs. So back in the day, camera makers had this whole system set out. We'll start off people when they're learning in point-and-shoot cameras. They're automatic, they're simple, they're pocketable. Then, after a few years, we get them to buy a bridge camera, which looks kind of like an SLR, but the lens is fixed. They get a little bit more comfortable with the form factor. And then we get them to buy an entry-level SLR, and then a few years later, maybe a mid-tier or a professional SLR. That was like the route. When this came out in the 90s, I think it was, at the end of the late 1900s, basically that had started to fall apart. And the camera manufacturers were using these entry-tier SLRs instead of a bridge camera to try to get people from the point-and-shoot market into these SLR bodies. So the viewfinder information, we also know this is an entry-level camera, not just because it's very lightweight and it's very, very automatic. The viewfinder does not provide much information. It has the autofocus point, a focus symbol to indicate if focus has been achieved or not, and a symbol to indicate whether or not the pop-up flash or an on-camera, on-body flash will fire. And other than that, the camera is basically entirely plastic. That includes the lens mount here, which is a plastic lens mount. This was not a camera which was designed to be used 25 years after its introduction, so the fact that these are still working at all, I think, is actually kind of amazing. These were produced by Minolta in Malaysia in 1999, so like I said, end of the late 1900s. It was preceded by nothing, as this was the first entry-level alpha mount camera, and it was followed by the Maxxum 3. If you're looking for an entry-level alpha mount camera, go with the Maxxum 3. It is a substantially better camera than this. In terms of ergonomics, it's more comfortable, it's a bit smaller, it's also a little bit better made, and I have not seen that many of the Alpha 3, 4, 5 bodies that have tarnishing issues. I think the Alpha 5, I think, has a prism. Anyway, the Alpha 3 bodies I have not seen as much of an issue over the years with the tarnishing of the mirrors like this. But other than that, the Alpha 3 has the exact same feature set with just, I think, an upgraded frame rate and a better meter. If you have your Minolta QTsi, we're going to do as we do, and we're going to go through all of the features on the camera, starting and talk about what they are. In the second video, we'll talk about how to use all of them to affect your photography in as much as you can. Starting here on technically the sides, we have the strap bars. This is where you will connect your camera strap to get your to hang it around your neck. Here are a couple of controls. You have your self timer and drive mode button here. So if you look over here on the side of the LCD screen, if we'll start off with nothing. No, we don't start off with nothing. So we'll start off here at single mode, and that little square right there indicates that it's in single shot drive mode. If you push the shutter button down, it will take a photo. Every time you push the shutter button down, it will take a photo. If you push the shutter button down and hold it down till the end of time, it will never take another photo. This next one is your self timer, and basically what this does is when you push the shutter button, the red light here on the front will flash to count down your self timer for 10 seconds. At the end of that 10-second countdown, faster flash, and then your photo. Push it again, and we get your continuous. Continuous is your camera will take shots until you run out of film if you hold the shutter button down long enough. Just like that. It's not a super fast burst rate, but it will keep working. So that's what the different drive modes do. Usually cover that in the second video. Next is your flash and flash mode selector right here. Flash modes are red eye reduction, no flash, and auto flash. Auto flash with red eye reduction, basically, and standard flash. The camera will pop up the flash if it thinks it needs to. Red eye reduction will pulse the flash before you take a photo so that your human subject eyes will will shrink, and the pupils will shrink, and they're less likely to have red eye reduction. Auto flash will allow the flash to have different powers or modes within it applied so that it does different things automatically. And then auto flash with red eye reduction is auto flash but with pulsing. So that's what those are for. Here's your pop-up flash. You can only the camera will pop up the flash if it says it. Oh, and no flash, by the way, is the flash is disabled. There we go. There we go. So the camera will only pop up the flash if you don't have enough light. You have no way to manually make the flash pop up. Flash hot shoe, you might notice it looks a bit weird because this was back when Minolta was using their intelligent ISO flash system, which Sony adopted and got rid of, thankfully, eventually. Here's the LCD screen. The mode button, we'll dive into this in the second video. Here's your shutter button right up here. On the camera's front, we have a few things. This is your self-timer light. lens mount, lens mounting index, Minolta QTsi Maxxum. This is your lens release button right here. You can see that it pulls this lens locking pin back into the body. Autofocus, manual focus mode switch, so you push it to switch between autofocus and manual focus. And here is your autofocus screw drive coupling. On this side of the camera, we have the film back release, which we use to open up the back of the camera. We'll see that again in just a moment. On this side of the camera, we have nothing. On the back of the camera, we have a few things. This is your film memo window. Basically, when you load your film, it lines up in here and you can see what type of film you have through this window. Viewfinder window, this is where you compose your scene to take your photos. Power switch. The camera's bottom has a few things of note. Tripod socket, serial number, made in Malaysia, and then your battery chamber right here. We're going to come back here to the side, and to get into the back of the camera, we push that lever release down, and now we can open up the camera back. Here's your film code, your film loading chamber right here. This is your DX code reader. You must have a DX code on your film. I don't have DX codes on this roll, but a DX code basically looks like a black and silver checkerboard. This camera can only use it can only use film that I believe, we'll talk about it for sure when we load up film, but I think that it will default to 100 ISO for non-DX coded film, and then it must have the DX code for any other speed. This is your film rewind motor coupling. Here's your shutter and image area. You have some guide rails molded into the plastic of the body right here. Oh, forgot about this button on the back. That is your manual film rewind button. So if you get halfway through a roll of film and realize you're not going to finish it, you just hold that down and then the film will rewind. Here's your film take-up roller right here, and the film will automatically advance the film when it's loaded correctly. This is your film index. We'll see this in the second video, but this is where you pull out your film leader to get the roller to take it up. On the film door, we have a couple of items. This spring and roller right here help keep tension on the film so that it is taken up by the film take-up spool properly. This is your film pressure plate so that the film is flat in front of the shutter right here, and so that light is focused properly on your film when the images are taken. This spring right here helps to keep your film cassette properly aligned inside the cassette chamber so that the film comes out of it and goes back in correctly. And then this foam around the window is a light seal to help ensure that you don't get light leaks that fog your film or streak your film from your film type window. I do have some tips for you on how to make the most of this camera. The first is that this is a super simple camera and it's a very austere shooting experience. So if you like simplicity in your photography, quite honestly, this camera does that very, very well. If you like a nice open viewfinder and you don't want to have to worry too much about how to shoot, you will probably like this camera a lot, or the Maxxum 3, same thing. Most controls on this camera are done on the LCD screen, and then the viewfinder is really just for focusing and composing. So most of your pre-work is going to be done on this LCD screen that we're going to look at in the second video. Some things not to do with your camera. Don't let it get wet because it's an electronic camera. It's not weather sealed. Water and electronics have a very long and turbulent history of not getting along, and if you get this camera wet, you will almost certainly short it out and ruin it. Don't leave it in your car because the heat can damage the plastic. The cold can damage the plastic, and both of those can also damage the lubricating oils in it. And when they get to places they shouldn't be, if they get really warm and thin, when they get back to the normal viscosity, they're not going to work very well. If they get very thick and gummy because they've broken down from being in the cold, then they're not going to lubricate well either. Also, camera thieves pretty much don't look at the make and model of the camera before they just break into your car and steal it. So even if you're just going to hop into the gas station to go to the bathroom, it's a good idea not to leave your camera sitting out. Take it in with you. The next thing is don't store this with the batteries in it. I believe that these use a quartz crystal system in them, if I remember correctly, which can drain the batteries over time. So these use CR2 batteries, which we'll talk about in the second video. They're not cheap and they are not rechargeable. So it's best just, if you're going to let this sit even for a few days, take the batteries out. And I guess really the most important thing I can tell you, oh yeah, don't touch the shutter with your fingers. Your finger oils can mess up the mechanism. Just touching the leaves can cause them to skip their track and jam. Also, don't touch the mirror in here because that can tarnish the mirror that's behind the lens. And just remember, your Minolta Maxxum QTsi is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. And as long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. So that's everything for the first video. In the second video, we're going to come back and we're going to go through the functions on this that we didn't accidentally cover already and talk about how they affect your shooting.